All right, so we're going to be diving into this KonMari method. It seems like it's everywhere these days, right? And honestly, when I first heard about, thanking your socks for sparking joy and all that, well, it seemed a little much, even for me.
Yeah, I can see how it might come across as a bit out there at first,
Yeah.
you know? But I think if we can kind of look past those catchy phrases for a second, Marie Kondo's whole approach, which comes from, that book everyone's talked about, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, it actually, well, there's some interesting psychology behind it.
Okay, so tell me more about that. Like, what is it about this method that's got everyone so hooked? Because it's more than just, like having a really organized closet.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely more than that. I think the real core idea here is that you're choosing what to keep based on feeling, not just whether something's useful or not.
Okay, so it's about how something makes you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the really interesting part, at least to me, is that Kondo's method isn't really just about getting rid of stuff. It's about uh, it's about understanding like why we even accumulate all this stuff in the first place,
Yeah.
and how the things that we own they actually they can reflect kind of who we are on the inside.
So is it kind of like therapy for your sock drawer?
Haha. Yeah, in a way. I mean, there's a lot of research coming out now that shows how clutter actually really affects our brains. Like it just bombards us with all this extra stimuli. And that makes it so much harder to focus on anything. So think about how you feel when you walk into a totally messy room versus a room that's, clean and organized,
Yeah, no, I get that.
right? That feeling of calm when things are tidy,
Yeah,
that's your brain finally getting a break,
totally. Yeah, my desk is definitely my nemesis some weeks. So walk me through this method a little bit. I mean, it's not just like randomly throwing things out,
Yeah.
right? Is there a system to this whole thing?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a method to it, I promise. So
Yeah.
Kondo actually lays out a very specific order for how you should tidy. You start with your clothes,
Yeah.
then you move on to books, then it's papers, then these miscellaneous items, she calls this category Komoro, and then only after all of that do you get to sentimental items.
Okay, so there's a reason for the order.
Yes.
All right, so why that order? Is there like a secret logic to it or something?
It's actually pretty smart when you think about it. So starting with categories like clothes, it kind of gives you a chance to practice making those spark joy decisions on items that might be a little less emotionally charged,
Okay.
So by the time you actually get to those boxes of like old letters and photos and things like that, you've had some practice. You've kind of honed your intuition about what really truly matters to you. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. So it's like you're working up to it. Like you're starting with the lighter weights at the gym, before you try to bench press something really heavy. But I'm curious about, this whole focus on individual feelings. Could that be a problem, especially like in a space you share with someone else?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. It's definitely it's important to remember that KonMari, it's not meant to be like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like in shared spaces, it's all about communication and compromise. Like maybe your partner's idea of joy is having a ton of tools in the garage, even if it doesn't do anything for you. You know what I mean?
Right, right. So it's more about like taking control of your own stuff and hopefully inspiring other people along the way.
Exactly.
But I am curious, this whole like the spark joy thing, it just seems so subjective. Like couldn't you end up throwing out perfectly useful things just because they're not like fun, you know?
I hear that. Yeah, it's the common concern that people have. But Kondo really stresses that you need to pay close attention to how you feel when you're actually holding an item in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel light? Does it feel uplifting? Or does it bring up like feelings of guilt or obligation? Or maybe just like nothing at all? You know?
So it's more than just like getting rid of stuff. It's like this whole mindful process of figuring out what actually adds value to your life.
Exactly.
Okay, well that sounds pretty powerful, but also like a little overwhelming, honestly. Where do you even start?
Well, Kondo is really big on this idea of like the mental game. Like you have to really commit to tidying up. You have to really envision your ideal lifestyle. Like how do you want your space to feel? What activities are most important to you? All of that before you even touch a single item.
Interesting. So it's about more than just getting rid of stuff. It's about creating a space that actually, reflects your values and supports your goals.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
And then comes what might be like the most controversial part of this whole method. It's the idea of discarding before you organize.
Wait, really? Why that order? Like, my instinct would be to, organize everything first and then see what I could get rid of.
I know it seems counterintuitive, but Kondo argues that if you organize first, you might actually end up keeping more than you need just because you found a spot for everything.
Okay.
But by discarding first, you're actually making those choices based on what's really bringing you joy, not just what fits on a shelf or in a drawer.
Huh. Okay. So we've got commitment, we've got vision, we've got ditching stuff before organizing. What's next?
Okay, so next comes that specific category order that we talked about. Clothes, books, papers, Kamino, and then finally sentimental items. And the key here really is that each step is about helping you refine your ability to actually recognize what sparks joy for you.
So it's like you're training your joy detecting senses as you go along. But I got to ask, how do you actually determine if like a spatula sparks joy? Is there some sort of like magic formula?
Well, Kondo would say that it's about holding the item,
Mm.
really paying attention to your body's response. Does it feel light? Does it feel energizing? Or does it feel heavy? Does it feel draining?
Right.
Trust your gut feeling.
Okay, so it's about tuning into that feeling. But let's be honest, sometimes letting go of things is just hard.
Mhm.
Even if you know logically that something isn't really serving you anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we get attached to our things. It's totally normal. Kondo, she understands that letting go can be hard, especially when it comes to things that have sentimental value.
Hmm.
But she also argues that by holding on to things that no longer really bring us joy, we're actually kind of clinging to the past and preventing ourselves from fully embracing the present.
So it's like decluttering your space can also declutter your mind.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And as we were talking about before, the research actually backs this up. Having a tidy environment, it can really lead to less stress, and it can help you focus better. So it's not just about how things look. It's about creating an environment that actually supports your well-being.
Right. Okay, yeah. No, I'm starting to see the appeal here. It's like it's a much more holistic approach. It's addressing both like, the physical clutter, but also that mental clutter that we all kind of carry around with us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think really sets the KonMari method apart is this real emphasis on gratitude.
Oh, yeah, I remember that from the book. You're supposed to like thank the items that you're getting rid of, right?
Yes, exactly. And it might seem a little strange at first, but it's really about acknowledging the role that those items played in your life and letting go of them with respect.
So it's like a way of letting go without all that guilt or regret that can sometimes, come with getting rid of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by thanking those items that are no longer serving you, you're making space to actually appreciate those things that do bring you joy.
That's a beautiful way to look at it, actually. It's like shifting your whole mindset from scarcity to abundance.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about, yeah, appreciating what you have instead of focusing on what you don't.
And I think that's a really powerful message for, all of us, whether we're trying to like, declutter our homes or just our lives in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that true joy, it comes from within, not from the things we own. But by surrounding ourselves with things that actually do spark joy, we can create an environment that supports our inner peace and our well-being.
This has been really eye-opening, I have to say. I'm starting to think about my own space in a totally different way now.
That's what's so cool about the KonMari method. It's not just a system for cleaning. It's like this whole journey of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages you to examine your relationship with your stuff and to really make conscious choices about what you bring into your life.
And as we've been talking about, that can have like these ripple effects on your well-being, on your relationships, even on your sense of self. It's pretty amazing.
It is. By getting rid of the clutter in our physical spaces, we're actually creating space for clarity, for creativity, for joy.
So for our listeners out there who are, maybe feeling inspired to try this out themselves, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
KonMari, it's a process. It's not a quick fix. It takes time to really sort through your belongings and to make decisions and to create new habits.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to adapt the method to your own needs and preferences. The goal here is to create a system that works for you and that brings you joy. So if something doesn't feel right, adjust it.
So find what sparks joy in the process, not just in the end result, right?
Exactly. And remember, KonMari, it's a tool. It's not a rule book. So use it to create a space that that really reflects your values and supports your well-being.
Well, this has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much already. Thanks for sharing your insights.
My pleasure. It's always so interesting to dive into these ideas and to see how they can be applied to, to create a more joyful and fulfilling life.
And for our listeners, if you were to try just one KonMari principle today, what would give you the biggest joy spark in your own space? Let us know. This deep dive was just the beginning.
Yeah, happy tidying, everyone.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the why behind this whole KonMari method, but now I kind of want to get into the nitty-gritty, the how. You know what I mean? Like, how do you actually do this thing? And you mentioned that last category, the sentimental items. That's got to be where things get like really tricky, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sentimental items, those are definitely the ones that carry the most uh, emotional weight, I'd say.
Mhm.
And that's actually exactly why Kondo recommends saving them for last. By the time you get to that point, you've already kind of had some practice making those decisions. You've gotten clear on what your values are, so you're better equipped to handle, the tougher stuff.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about opening that box of old yearbooks, I guess. But
Right.
still, I mean, how do you actually apply that spark joy test to something like, I don't know, like a handmade card that your kid made you?
Mhm.
Even if it looks more like, a bunch of random scribbles than an actual drawing, you
Oh,
can't
no.
just donate that, right?
Yeah, well, you hit on a really important point there. The spark joy test. It's not really about judging something based on, how it looks. It's about the feeling that the item gives you.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
that card from your kid, it might be, visually a little messy,
Yeah.
but if it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of, love for your child, well, that's the spark.
So it's not necessarily about like pure joy, right? It's like spark meaning or something. Because let's be real, I mean, some memories they're bittersweet, right?
Mhm.
They're tied to, I don't know, maybe loss or tough times. Does KonMari take that into account at all?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Kondo, she really stresses that you need to be honest with yourself about all of the emotions that an item brings up for you.
Okay.
Like if something brings up more sadness than joy,
Ugh.
or if it just feels like a burden to keep, then, it might be time to let it go. But, and this is key, you let go with gratitude for, whatever role it played in your life.
Okay, I'm trying to picture myself having this like thank you conversation with an old photo album. And I gotta say, it feels a little silly. But is there actually a point to doing that? Like, does it do anything besides maybe making you feel a little bit better about getting rid of stuff?
Well, it might feel a little strange at first,
Hmm.
but the research actually shows that gratitude can be really powerful when it comes to letting go of things. When you focus on what you're thankful for, it shifts your perspective away from, that feeling of scarcity or loss.
So, thanking that old sweater for, I don't know, for keeping me warm back in college, even if it's totally moth-eaten now,
Yeah.
that helps me to feel, what, less like I'm losing something
Yeah.
and more like I'm making space for something new.
Yeah, exactly. It's about honoring the past without clinging to it, and that can be incredibly freeing.
Okay, I'm starting to see the wisdom in that, even if it does mean having uh some slightly weird conversations with, you know, inanimate objects. But I do want to talk about like the more practical side of this. Like, what about heirlooms? You know, those things that have like family history attached to them or gifts that you feel like you have to keep even if they're just collecting dust in the attic.
That's where things can get really personal and complicated. And um, the KonMari method actually encourages us to question those obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is keeping your grandma's china really honoring her memory? Or would she actually rather see you enjoying your space and not feeling weighed down by stuff that you don't actually use?
It's like that saying, right? You can't declutter a life you never lived.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it's also it's kind of empowering to think about actually taking control of your space and what you choose to put in it.
Absolutely. And sometimes letting go of a physical object,
Mm.
it doesn't actually mean that you're letting go of the memory or the relationship that it represents.
Right.
You can take a picture of it, you can write down the story behind it, preserve the essence of it without actually having to keep the physical thing itself.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little bit. I'm already looking at my bookshelf like with a whole new set of eyes. But I am curious, is there anything that the KonMari method like doesn't address? Are there any, I don't know, downsides or things that people should be aware of before they, dive in head first?
Well, as we've been discussing, it can be really easy to get caught up in that whole spark joy thing And you might end up getting rid of things that you later regret.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really important to pace yourself, to really think about those decisions before you make them.
And remember, spark joy, it's not an excuse to, go out and buy a bunch of new stuff just because it's shiny and new.
Exactly. The KonMari method, it works best when you combine it with, mindful consumption habits.
Mm-hmm.
And with the understanding that real joy, it comes from experiences, from relationships, from personal growth, not just from stuff.
Right, right. So it's a tool for self-discovery, not a justification to go on a shopping spree.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. What about, are there any other, potential pitfalls, I guess, that people should watch out for?
One critique that you hear sometimes is that it can be a little too individualistic, I guess. Like it doesn't really address the needs of, people who share their space,
Right.
especially family members who maybe don't share, the same philosophy about tidying up.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's important to, have those conversations with the people you live with and to find compromises.
Absolutely. And it is worth noting that the KonMari method, while it's incredibly popular, it's not like scientifically proven to solve every problem.
Right.
It's not a cure-all for, mental health issues or anything like that. It's not going to magically make your life perfect.
Okay, so manage those expectations, right?
Yes.
Tidy house, tidy mind, but it's not magic. Got it. So any final words of wisdom for our listener who might be, ready to start their own KonMari journey?
I would say just be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Be honest about, what's working and what's not working. And don't be afraid to adapt the method to fit your own needs, your own personality.
Yeah.
This is really about creating a space that reflects who you are and that supports the life that you want to live.
I love that. Okay, well, this has been incredible. We've covered so much. We talked about the psychology behind clutter. We talked about the environmental impact of all of our choices. But is there anything we've missed? Are there any, I don't know, final thoughts or insights that you want to share with our listener before we move on?
I think we've hit on most of the key points. But the one thing that I would emphasize is that the KonMari method, it's a very personal journey.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to do it. And what works for one person might not work for another.
It's about finding what sparks joy for you, not for anyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I am curious, though. I mean, you spent so much time researching this. Have you ever been tempted to try it out yourself? Like, has it changed the way you think about, your own stuff?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've always been a pretty organized person, but the KonMari method has definitely made me more aware of, of the emotional weight that I attach to my stuff. Like I started asking myself, does this actually bring me joy? Or am I holding on to it out of, I don't know, guilt, obligation, things like that?
So it's kind of like it's shifted your mindset, even if you haven't, gone full KonMari on your entire house.
Exactly, yeah.
That's interesting. And speaking of shifting mindsets, I'm wondering if there are any other philosophies or approaches out there that kind of align with this KonMari method. Is there a bigger conversation happening here about, I don't know, minimalism or mindful consumption or intentional living, things like that?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the KonMari method, it's definitely part of this larger movement towards simplifying our lives.
Yeah.
Focusing on what really matters. And there are tons of resources out there, books, podcasts, online communities, workshops, all sorts of things that are dedicated to helping people live more intentionally, more sustainably.
So it's not just about, tidying up our homes, it's about tidying up our lives, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities here, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room.
You mean those sentimental items we were talking about?
Exactly. We've been dancing around it long enough. I think it's time to finally face those boxes of memories head on. I mean, our listeners probably wondering by now, how on earth do you apply the spark joy test to things that are, so connected to our past?
You're right. It's time to get real about those sentimental items. They can be the most challenging part of this whole process, for sure, but they can also be the most rewarding. Because when we learn to let go of those things that are no longer serving us, we create space for new memories, for new experiences, for new joys to enter our lives.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into the deep end of the emotional decluttering pool, I guess. But I think our listener might need a minute to brace themselves. Okay, so everyone listening out there, take a deep, breath with me. We're about to go deep into like the heart of KonMari territory. We're talking sentimental items, the stuff that can make even, the most organized person out there kind of sweat a little. You've been researching this method, so tell me, what's the secret to tackling this stuff? I mean, it's like an emotional minefield, right?
Well, the first thing to remember is that whole idea about order that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Kondo's really smart about this. She puts sentimental items dead last for a reason. So by the time you actually get to this point, you've already, you've been working those decision-making muscles. You've gotten clear on your values. So you should be a little more prepared, hopefully, to handle the really tough stuff.
Okay, yeah. No, that does make me feel a little bit better about, finally opening up that box of like old yearbooks and things. But how do you actually apply that spark joy test to something like, I don't know, a handmade card from your kid? Even if, the artwork, let's be honest, looks more like a toddler just, went crazy with some finger paints. You can't just like donate that kind of stuff.
Right. You hit on a really important point there. The spark joy test, it's not about judging something based on how it looks. It's not about aesthetics. It's about the feeling that that item evokes in you when you hold it. So yeah, that card that your kid made you, it might be visually, well, let's just say it might not win any art awards.
Right.
But if it gives you that feeling, that warm, fuzzy feeling of, love for your kid, well, then that's it,
Wow.
That's the spark.
So it's not always about like pure joy, right? It's more about spark meaning maybe. Because some memories, they're kind of bittersweet, right? They're tied to, I don't know, like loss or maybe like, just tough times in your life. Does KonMari like acknowledge that at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. Kondo, she's really big on being honest about the full range of emotions that something might bring up.
Okay.
So if something brings up more sadness than joy, or if it just feels like, I don't know, a burden to keep, then yeah, it might be time to let it go. But and this is key. You let go of it with gratitude.
Right.
Like you acknowledge, the role that it played in your life, whatever that was.
Okay, so I'm really trying to picture myself like having this thank you conversation with like an old photo album, and I gotta say, it does feel a little, I don't know, a little silly, honestly. Is there actually a point to doing that, though? Besides, I guess, making yourself feel a little bit better about getting rid of things.
It might feel a little weird at first, but there's research on this. Gratitude can be a really powerful tool when it comes to letting go of things.
Really?
Yeah. When you focus on what you're thankful for, it actually helps you to kind of shift your perspective. You're not thinking about what you're losing. You're thinking about what you're grateful for.
So like thanking that old sweater for, I don't know, keeping me warm all those years ago in college, even if it's, totally full of holes now, that helps me to like feel less like I'm actually losing something and more like I'm making space for something new.
Exactly. It's about, honoring the past, but not clinging to it. And that can be really, really freeing, actually.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm definitely starting to get that. Even if it does mean, having a couple of strange conversations with some inanimate objects. But let's get practical for a second. What about like heirlooms? Things that have family history attached to them, or gifts that you feel like you're, obligated to keep, even if they're just sitting in a box somewhere gathering dust.
Yeah, that's where things can get they can get really personal.
Yeah.
And really, really complicated, honestly. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that the KonMari method actually encourages us to question those obligations. Like, are you really honoring your grandma's memory by keeping her china? Or would she actually rather see you, enjoying your space, not feeling weighed down by all this stuff that you don't actually use?
It's like that saying, you can't declutter a life you never lived,
Exactly.
It's definitely tough. But it's also kind of empowering, I think, to think about really taking control of your space, deciding what you want to keep, what you want to surround yourself with.
It is. And sometimes, letting go of a physical object doesn't mean that you're letting go of the memory or the relationship that it represents.
Right.
You can take a picture of it. You can write down, the story behind it. You can preserve the essence of it without actually having to keep the physical thing.
This is really making me think. I'm already looking around my apartment like with a whole new perspective on everything. I am curious, though. Is there anything that the KonMari method, like, doesn't address? Are there any, I don't know, downsides or things that people should, like, watch out for before they, jump in with both feet?
Well, I think as we've kind of touched on, it can be easy to get caught up in that spark joy thing
Hmm.
and maybe go to a little overboard. Like you might end up getting rid of things that later on you realize, oh shoot, I actually kind of wish I still had that.
Yeah.
So it's really important to pace yourself, to really think about those decisions before you make them permanent.
And remember, spark joy. It's not a free pass to just go out and like buy a whole bunch of new stuff just because, it's new and shiny.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. The KonMari method, it works best when you pair it with, more mindful consumption habits.
Mm.
And also the understanding that true joy, real joy, it comes from experiences, it comes from relationships, it comes from, personal growth. It doesn't come from just accumulating more stuff.
And okay, yeah. So it's a tool for self-discovery, not an excuse to go on a shopping spree.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. Are there any other potential pitfalls, I guess, things that people should be aware of?
Well, one thing that you hear sometimes is that um, the the method can be a little too individualistic.
Okay.
Like it doesn't really address the needs of people who share their space.
Right.
Especially families where maybe not everybody is on board with this whole philosophy of tidying up.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's really important to have those conversations with the people that you live with, right? And to try to find compromises that work for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it is worth mentioning that as popular as the KonMari method is, it's not like a scientifically proven solution to
Yeah.
to every problem. It's
Right.
not, a cure-all for mental health issues or anything. It's not going to magically, make your life perfect.
Right. Okay. So manage those
Yeah,
expectations. Tidy house, tidy mind, but it's not magic.
exactly.
Okay, got it. So any final words of wisdom for our listener who might be, getting ready to embark on their own KonMari adventure?
I would say just be patient with yourself. Be honest about what's working, what's not working for you. And don't be afraid to adapt the method to really fit your own needs, your own personality. This is about creating a space that really reflects who you are
Hmm.
and that supports, the life that you want to live.
That's beautifully said. Okay, well, this has been, I mean, what an incredible deep dive. We've talked about, the psychology behind clutter. We talked about the environmental impact of all of our choices. I think our listener is walking away with like, a toolbox full of insights and inspiration to really tackle this stuff.
It's been such a pleasure exploring all these ideas with you. And, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to just approach this with curiosity, with kindness, and with a healthy dose of self-awareness, I'd say.
And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, just, start small. Maybe tackle that junk drawer before you go full KonMari on your entire house. You never know, you might just find a little spark of joy along the way.